Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go online to weather.gov/Alaska. There's all sorts of information on there, some additional details to what I provide in this weather segment. And if you'd like to reach me, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov with any comments, observations, or interesting photos. Well, in our weather headlines, wind chill advisory is in effect this evening through early Thursday morning for broad past the upper Susitna Valley, where wind chill values could get down as cold as 40 to 50 below zero on the backside of low pressure. Low pressure that is out over the northern Gulf now is producing winter storm warnings for Yakutat, Haines, and Skagway, with snowfall amounts on the order of 6 to 12 inches being rather common. Winter weather advisory remains in effect for Hyder, and now we've added Juneau and Pelican as we go through the overnight into Wednesday. And coming up Thursday evening, later Thursday evening, an almost total lunar eclipse. We had an eclipse visible back in May of this year, but this one's a little more interesting. I'll tell you more about that shortly. Well, here is Haines, the FAA Skycam out of the Haines Airport. A winter storm warning for heavy snow. Haines has picked up at least 10 inches of snow through about 3 o'clock this Tuesday afternoon. Other areas, Yakutat, nearly 7 inches of snow. Only an inch of snow so far in Juneau, but they will see some additional lighter snowfall, not as heavy what will fall in the northern panhandle here overnight into Wednesday. Quick check along the Arctic coast. Dead Horse, notice the lower afternoon sun angle. And temperatures there have remained sub-zero. The high temperature was only 6 below with a low of 18 below. In some areas of the interior, we're down around 35 below zero this morning at Bettles as well as Wiseman, and 30 below at Arctic Village and Ambler. Well, let's look at the hazardous weather map where the current warnings and advisories are. Winter storm warnings continue there for the northern panhandle. Winter weather advisories for Juneau, just north of Sitka, including Pelican, on over toward Hyder. And then to the west, that broad area there south of the Alaska Range is really only for the broad past upper Susitna Valley, where a wind chill advisory is in effect, as some stronger north winds will be developing here as we go through tonight and into Wednesday. And looking at the winter storm warning, we have winter storm warnings that will continue into Wednesday morning or till about noon across the northern panhandle. Some areas will be picking up, especially around the mountains, in excess of a foot. But as far as within Haines, as I mentioned, already 10 inches of snow has fallen. And as for the southeast, we're anticipating on the order of 4 to maybe as much as 6 inches around Hyder, and that would be through the mid-morning on Wednesday. Looking at the winds on the backside of this low, they're going to start cranking up here, especially as we go through early Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon. And notice there, the winds coming through the mouth of Cook Inlet there around the Barren Islands, storm force winds that could gust to hurricane force, so quite a blow happening there. And then up the Susitna Valley, we could see some stronger winds coming down off of the Alaska Range, creating wind chills that will be down around 40 to 50 below zero at Broad Pass. And I can see those winds really taking shape there through the day on Wednesday, coming out of the mouth of Cook Inlet through the Barren Islands. As I mentioned, some of the gusts could be up around hurricane force. Well, we got something coming up in the sky here, an almost total lunar eclipse. It'll be 97% total. And a little unusual circumstances have arisen for this to occur. It's also going to be one of the longest duration lunar eclipses in like 6 centuries. And this all comes back to the complex geometry of the moon's orbit around the Earth, and things have just kind of lined up right for this to be a longer eclipse. The moon is near apogee, so it's farthest from the Earth. It has a little more time to pass through the Earth's shadow. So the eclipse will begin when it enters the lighter penumbral shadow at 9:02, but to really see things, it will not be until after 10 p.m. on Thursday evening. You'll start to see the moon take on that ruddy color, and the mid-eclipse is a few minutes after midnight and will continue until 3 a.m. or so on early Friday morning. So if you have a chance under the cold conditions, you may notice a color tinge there, that ruddy appearance to the moon here around midnight on Thursday night. And looking at satellite imagery, well, we have the storm system there moving up through the Gulf, and that's the low pressure up over the north central Gulf. We have another front moving through at least the western half and central Aleutians, and that will have with it some additional winds and precipitation as that moves eastward. It will not be a major system. Main weather feature, though, is the low out over the Gulf, and with that surge of moisture that pushed inland up through the Panhandle, bringing snow, mixing with and changing to rain along the outer coast. And then meanwhile, to the northwest, we have high pressure that'll be building in from the Arctic Ocean, the Russian coast, the lower Chukchi Sea will just reinforce the cold air across the interior. Meanwhile, the low continues to wind up and spin there through the day on Wednesday with those stronger gap or outflow winds on the backside of the low as the winds go from northeast to north and then northwesterly along the length of Cook Inlet and especially south of the Alaska Range. This will also lend to some turbulence even on the west side of the Alaska Range on up through the Yukon Valley for those of you with aviation interest. And that we expect that high pressure is just going to keep the cold air in place right up on through mid-month. No problem at all. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, lows were down around 35 below zero at Bettles and Wiseman. Well, notice out toward the Bering, the cold air, the Arctic air, just kind of stalls out, stationary front there over the central Bering. It's kind of a natural, the warmer waters of the Bering Sea act as a natural barrier. It really takes a big push for the Arctic air to press really further south and west. And we'll see low pressure get a little more consolidated by Thursday afternoon out there through the central and western Aleutians, with high pressure firmly in place across especially the northern half of the state into northwest Canada. So low temperatures Wednesday morning will generally be above freezing across the southern 2/3 of the Panhandle, but around or below freezing there in the north, and still below zero across the south central interior. High temperatures should get back up near 40 degrees across much of the Panhandle on Wednesday afternoon, with snow mixing with or changing back to some rain. Back across the interior, though, single digits above and below zero. Thursday morning lows will be back down below freezing northern Panhandle and could be below zero all the way down into the Kenai Peninsula, including Anchorage. And then for Thursday afternoon, temperatures stay single digits above and below zero there in the south central interior, with 30s across the Panhandle. Across the northern portions of the state, sub-zero readings will reign. Areas that stay clear, where you don't get any low stratus clouds form, you're going to see temperatures down in the 25 to 35 below range, especially between the Brooks Range and Alaska Range in through the Yukon Valley. And then Wednesday afternoon, single-digit highs along the Arctic coast, but remaining sub-zero there south side of the Brooks Range, north side of the Alaska Range. And Thursday morning, again, widespread sub-zero temperatures with some areas, again, especially there toward Ambler, Bettles, 35 below zero, no problem. Thursday afternoon, sub-zero readings again across the Yukon Valley, single digits along the Arctic coast and the coastal areas of the Seward Peninsula. The interior of the Southwest Wednesday morning will be down in the 10 to 20 below range with locally colder readings like at Aniak. And then extending out, temperatures get above freezing as you get out through the eastern Aleutians. And for Wednesday afternoon, temperatures remain sub-zero across the middle and upper Kuskokwim and Yukon valleys. And temperatures should get above freezing there up at least through maybe about Cold Bay or so. And into the 40s, lower 40s there across the Aleutians. Thursday morning lows continue sub-zero across the interior, with above freezing temperatures from the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern Aleutians, out past west of Adak. And then high temperatures Thursday afternoon may get to near zero there in the interior, slight modification with highs generally in the lower 40s out across the Aleutian chain. Here's the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook centered on November 24th, and it's showing below normal temperatures continuing across the west side of the state, maybe a little moderation through the southeast and through the Panhandle. And then precipitation should stay below normal along the west coast, but creeping upwards above normal in through the southeastern quadrant of the state, and especially from along the Alcan border down through the Panhandle, as we would expect, because we get low pressures that come up into the Gulf and fling plumes of moisture on up into the Panhandle region.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, for all you pilots out there, it's now time for aviation weather. If you are planning a flight this midweek, Wednesday into Thursday, low pressure over the north central Gulf will be the main weather player. South central panhandle areas, winter storm warnings continue around Yakutat, Haines, Skagway, at least until midnight this Tuesday night into the early morning hours of Wednesday. We are going to see a transition, especially along the outer coastal areas there, from snow to rain, and a mix of snow and rain before things begin to taper off during the day on Wednesday. And pockets of IFR, Copper River Basin up along the north slope there, as well as back toward the central Aleutians with a frontal system. Wednesday afternoon, look for IFR conditions to expand again across the Panhandle, remaining there across the Copper River Basin, St. Elias National Park area, and then on up toward the areas there along the central north slope, just to the north of the Brooks Range, and then also pumping up into the central Aleutians. And for Thursday morning, look for conditions to relax a bit in the Panhandle, but still IFR along the Elcan border into the Copper River Basin, as well as the eastern half of the north slope, right along the north side of the Brooks Range, on through the central Aleutians. And look for the IFR conditions to abate across the mainland, as well as the Panhandle, but increase across the tip of the Alaska Peninsula throughout much of the Aleutian chain. Wednesday pass conditions, Anativik will be MVFR through the pass, with MVFR conditions the further north you fly, and then the south entrance. As you fly south of there, look to encounter VFR conditions. Same thing at Adigan, MVFR conditions throughout the pass, though VFR conditions will be possible the further south you fly of the south entrance. Lake Clark and Merrill will generally see MVFR conditions become VFR by afternoon, and that'll be the case at Rainy Pass as well. Windy Pass should hold on to MVFR conditions throughout the day on Wednesday, and we'll have turbulence there and along the western arms, central areas of the Alaska Range. Isabel should generally hold on to MVFR conditions on Wednesday, as will Mentasta, and then dropping southwestward. Tanita, MVFR conditions, though look to encounter IFR conditions the further east you fly of the east entrance toward the Copper River Basin. And then for Portage, look for VFR conditions to become MVFR as we go through the later morning and afternoon. Chilkoot and White may see a brief relaxation to MVFR conditions early Wednesday, coming back to IFR conditions, though, as we go through the afternoon. And freezing levels are down near the surface there, the outer Panhandle from around Sitka up to Gustavus, and then just off of the Kodiak Island to the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, back up toward just off the coast of Russia, Kamchatka Peninsula. Freezing levels may come up between 2,000 to 3,000 feet there out through the central Aleutians. And the greatest threat for icing in through the northern Gulf Coast and Panhandle will be between 5,000 and 14,000 feet on Wednesday. Also an area out over the lower Bering in through the central Aleutians between 5,000 and 17,000 feet. Upper jet stream level winds 30,000 feet. We see a low pressure circulation there up near Prince William Sound. And we have winds, strongest winds aloft coming into British Columbia. And then we have an area of winds circulating around that low from the northwest across the southwest portion of the state into Kodiak Island up to 105 knots, dropping down to mid-levels at the 9,000 foot level. Wind core of 50 to 65 knots out over the western Gulf, back to the entrance there to the mainland from the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, and then further north winds out through the Yukon Valley out of the east-northeast, 45-50 knots, and dropping down to the 3,000 foot level. That low pressure system remains in place, Prince William Sound, the far north end of the Gulf. It's basically vertically stacked. Core of winds 40-50 knots there, south side of the Brooks Range to the mid Yukon Valley, turning down along the west side of the Alaska Range, and then coming back in and across Kodiak Island, including the mouth of Cook Inlet, the Barren Islands. You're going to see stronger winds, storm force winds at the surface, even gusting to near hurricane force. So there will be turbulence there, even isolated severe turbulence there, mouth of Cook Inlet around the Barren Islands. Generally, though, between surface and 4,000 feet, most areas in surface, and 6,000 feet for the Panhandle, as well as areas around, especially the west side there of the Alaska Range. So that wraps up your flight weather. If you are planning to have a flight, check the latest conditions and have a safe one.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us, now that the debris has moved out of satellite view. And with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit. Go to the stair tower and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami, we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof. And so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. Hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
It's time for marine weather, and with today's sea ice edge, we have extensive ice now along the Arctic coast from Katovik on over to Utqiagvik, and then we still have some open areas of water yet in the Chukchi Sea, but it is filling in quickly. And as we go down along the west coast, we see the ice expanding from Norton Sound all along the YK deltas into Bristol Bay. And with the cold air, the Arctic air in place, the ice is just going to continue to build here as we head through the end of the month. Wednesday's marine forecast for the Panhandle, the inner canals, we're looking at winds 25-30 knots, some gusts 40 to 45 knots from the south, Petersburg northward up through Juneau, Lynn Canal. Areas along the Gulf, winds will be southwest to west, 25 to 30 knots with waves 13 to 17 feet. On Thursday, south winds continue across the inner canals, 20 to 25 knots, still some gusts to 40 knots possible in Lynn Canal with waves of 5 feet. And then along the Gulf Coast, waves still generally running in the 11 to 14 foot range from Craig up to Yakutat. And across south central areas, look for those gap winds, outflow winds there, mouth of Cook Inlet, the Barren Islands between Kodiak and Homer. Sustained up around 50 knots or so, gusting to 75 knots. That's above hurricane force. And we're looking at waves at least 15 feet there. Elsewhere, 35 knot northwest winds, Prince William Sound, waves 7 feet and 11 footers off the Kenai Peninsula. Thursday, winds come down considerably. Northeast winds, upper Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, waves running a few feet. And again, the Barren Islands winds will be out of the northwest, 30 to 35 knots, waves 9 to 10 feet. Across Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, winds gusting up to 60 knots there from the northwest, and waves upwards to 9 feet. On the Bering side, north winds 20 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet once you get past Bristol Bay on up toward Cold Bay. And then for Thursday, winds still coming offshore, cold northwesterly flow, and winds 25 knots, 30 knots there. Kodiak Island, waves 5 to 7 feet. And then along the Bering side, winds will be northeast to east, 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 to 7 feet. Across the Aleutian chain, the eastern half will see winds out of the east-southeast around 20 knots, waves 5 to 8 feet on the Pacific side, 5 to 7 feet, say, on the North Bering side. And then as we go into Thursday, there will be stronger winds out over the central Bering along a frontal boundary. But for the actual Aleutians, winds will generally be out of the southeast or east, turning southerly as you get toward the mid or central Aleutians at 20 to 25 knots, and waves generally running around 8-9 feet. Along the west coast, we continue to see north-northeast flow off the mainland, around 20 knots, waves generally in the 5 to 7 foot range, though could be upwards to 12 feet around St. Matthew. And then as we get into Thursday, strengthening winds as low pressure gets consolidated over the central Aleutians. We're going to see the gradient pick up with stronger winds to 40 knots there, St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. George. Waves there building to 13 to 17 feet. Much lighter northeasterly winds, 20 knots, 4-footers there, Norton Sound. And then as we get up along the Arctic coast, winds will generally be going from west to north, around 15 knots or so, with plenty of ice in place. And along the Chukchi Sea, northeast to east winds at 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. And for Thursday, generally westerly winds, strongest upwards to 40 knots at Kaknavik. And we're seeing ice, though, in place in the lower Chukchi Sea, winds out of the northeast at 20 knots and waves 2 to 4 feet, with 8-footers on the north side of St. Lawrence and to the west there of Port Clarence. And I just want to make a quick correction and a reminder, we have an almost total lunar eclipse coming up Thursday night. It'll begin at 9:02 Alaska time, when the moon first enters the lighter of the Earth's shadow, what we call the penumbral shadow. And by the time it reaches the darker umbra, that's the darker shadow, that'll happen after 10 p.m. And mid-eclipse is expected to occur a few minutes after midnight, and then look for the eclipse to gradually wane as we get into the early morning hours of Friday. One thing I did have to correct there was the time. Make sure it's AM there on the Friday side. So sorry about that earlier in the show. It's kind of hectic at times getting all these graphics together. But I do hope you have a chance to get out if skies are clear to capture this, because this will be one of the longest duration lunar eclipses in nearly 6 centuries.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.